Because the graphic depiction of the effects of a nuclear war may not be suitable for young viewers, parental discretion is advised.
Some people fantasize about playing Major League Baseball. Others imagine what it would be like to cheat on their significant other with the cute barista. Me? I often think about doing a platypus man. Now calm down, dear, I'm not going to do it. It's ideation, not intent. It's not like a clinical depression thing either. I think emotionally and psychologically, I'm fairly balanced. It's just that while some people are affected by time, I get affected by the weather. And sweet fucking Christ, does the global forecast call for showers. But I assure you, hitting a home run for the Dodgers or banging 19-year-old Olivia from Starbucks behind my love Nadia's back is far more likely to happen than blowing my brains out in the bathroom. Because first and foremost, I am very fortunate to have a loving family, and I pity those not related to genuinely decent people who they actually like to spend time with, because that is not my situation. Sure, they drive me up the fucking wall sometimes, but they're good people, supportive people. They're also cursed with an unconditional love towards me that I don't understand, but I'm not going to question it, and I'm certainly not going to rain on their affection parade by sending them a bill to my funeral. And second, to X myself out of this planet would be to deny myself the remote possibility that I will live long enough to see at least a couple of the people responsible for causing so much misery in this world, to say nothing of my former United States, face some kind of terrible end. It could be the cosmic justice of a fat senile member of the Epstein Files Club succumbing to deep vein thrombosis. Or it could be the poetic justice of a round of 30-06 perforating the throat of a man who openly admitted to being fine with innocent lives being sacrificed for the Second Amendment. Or it could be the ha sucks to be you justice of an ICE agent growing to a ripe old age, unacknowledged by their orange Führer, ignored by their embarrassed families, and now they sit there, weak and lonely, trying to fool themselves that they did the right thing. But eventually, the guilt gets to be too much for them, and so they take out their government-issued Glock 19, chamber a round of Speer Gold Dot 9mm jacketed hollow point, put the barrel into their mouths, and squeeze the trigger. Joke's on them. Now they get to burn in hell forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and take over for me, T.
Die, you no-good, low-life motherfucker. Die, you piece of shit bastard. Fuck you. Rust in hell, you motherfucker.
It's the possibility of any and all of the above that makes dealing with the mean Reds worth it for me. Some people call it hope. So yeah, I'm good. This isn't some kind of call for help. Don't email me or DM me with, "Is everything all right?" Because that's not what emails and DMs are for. They're for buttering me up and telling me how much you like the podcast, and that's it. Besides, most of us with any hints of empathy, traces of integrity, and a tiny bit of something resembling a soul, well, we're all feeling the big sad nowadays, and I am but just another one of us telling another one of us, yeah, me too. I'm okay, and I hope you are okay. Relatively speaking, of course. I get it. Lighten up, Francis. Cheer up, you. And so I decided to do just that by spending my Sunday watching 4 movies to brighten my darkened state of mind. The Day After, Threads, Testament, and When the Wind Blows. I'm only going to discuss the first 2 because I think you can only stand so much long-winded happiness, plus I'm lazy.
Hello, I'm John Cullum. In this evening's ABC Theater presentation of The Day After, I play a father in a typical American family who experienced the catastrophic events of a full-scale nuclear war. Before the movie begins, we would like to caution parents about the graphic depiction of nuclear explosions and their devastating effects. The emotional impact of these scenes may be unusually disturbing, and we are therefore recommending that very young children not be permitted to watch. In homes where young people are watching, we'd like to suggest that the family watch together so that parents can be on hand to answer questions and discuss issues raised by the movie. Immediately following The Day After, ABC will present a special edition of Viewpoint that will explore some of the political, military, and psychological aspects of the nuclear age. In a moment, The Day After.
When I was a very little kid, the USA Network used to air a program on the weekends called Night Flight. They showed movies, short films, animation, and music videos all night long. I loved watching it, and there was a segment there called Atomic TV that blended music videos with footage from atomic tests and civil defense films. And that was my introduction to a little concept called nuclear war. At 7 years old, I was too young to be frightened by nuclear war, at first, and so I was fascinated by it. I used to draw colorful mushroom clouds looming over neighborhoods, and I started looking up anything about nuclear war at my local library, where I was finally able to make scary sense out of it. I found a book called Nobody Wants a Nuclear War by Judith Vigna, which was intended to calm children's anxieties, but it kinda had the opposite effect on me, because it introduced me to what such a war would entail. The end of fucking everything. But I had to know more. I found grown-up books at the library about the subject, and I then went to the video section, where I came across a videotape of something called The Day After, which had a cover of a woman standing outside her house looking up at the sky as missiles launched in the background. I turned over the box, and wow, there was a big mushroom cloud on it. And if that weren't enough, as someone who was well into becoming a Trekkie, I recognized the name Nicholas Meyer as the director. The director of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, was behind this? Of course I rented it. I think my parents were okay with me renting it because I was a precocious little shit. More importantly, they knew that there was no sex in the movie, which would probably explain why by the time I was 16, I knew how to handle firearms and I was ready to kill a motherfucker if need be, but I was absolutely frightened to talk to a girl. For those not familiar, The Day After is a made-for-TV movie from 1983, aka the most dangerous year of the Cold War, with tensions between the United States of America and the Soviet Union not seen since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Produced by the American Broadcasting Company and aired on the ABC network, the film's premise was, if the USA and the USSR were to get into nuclear conflict, it might go a little something like this. It takes place in and around Kansas City, Missouri, and Lawrence, Kansas, where we get to know a number of people from different parts of these different parts, before those parts get vaporized, blown apart, and incinerated. We follow characters like Dr. Russell Oakes, played by Jason Robards, as he watches the news with his wife, getting updates about NATO and the Warsaw Pact waving their dicks around with alarming frequency. It feels like 1962 all over again to Mr. and Mrs. Oakes, but cooler heads prevailed back then, and the Oakes are sure that they will cool down today as well. That's the attitude shared by everyone else in the film during this section. Of course neither we or the Ruskies will go all the way. That's madness. In the meantime, all we can do is continue to live our regularly scheduled lives, or at most, hit the nearest supermarket for some good old panic buying. But the nightmare becomes reality, and the missiles go flying. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. It's left vague as to who shot first, because it really doesn't matter, does it? Once the nukes are launched, the game's over. There's a character named McCoy who works at one of the many Minuteman silos in Kansas, and once he and his boys have launched their entire stockpile, he tells them that there's no point in standing by to follow additional orders when they know that they're all as good as dead. Rather than stay at the silo with the others, McCoy makes a run for it in an attempt to get to his wife and kid before the end. He doesn't make it in time. We watch as his wife and child turn into living X-rays, going from flesh to bone before our eyes, with only a millisecond to scream. We watch as countless people in the city all get vaporized, and it's really unsettling. Men, women, children, animals, every trace of them erased from existence. They're the luckiest of the lucky ones, though. They go out quick. The second luckiest are engulfed in the firestorm. Each of these deaths are seen fleetingly. Being unable to fully register what just happened to them somehow makes it even more horrific. There are impressive shots of mushroom clouds on the horizon and some scary special effects involving flashes in the sky and walls of fire covering the screen. But there are also very cheesy uses of stock footage from atomic tests that take away from the impact. It's all the public domain stuff that you've seen elsewhere, including the shot of the trees where they're hit by a shockwave and they move back and to the right, back and to the right. You've seen that very same shot at the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa. I've seen that very same shot at the beginning of Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa probably 3 or 4 times more than you. Of course, James Cameron topped all of this with his nuclear holocaust sequence in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. But this is still very frightening stuff, especially for a TV movie from the 1980s. The second half of the film deals with the aftermath, as the survivors make their way through the rubble during nuclear winter, searching for food, water, and medical attention, which are all in scarce supply. Long lines are formed, but order can only last for so long. People fight and eventually kill for these things, and the President of the United States has the unmitigated gall to put out a radio address about how America has survived, as if such a thing even matters anymore. We see the fallout-caked corpses of an old man and a young boy sprawled across a war memorial that reads, "In memory of our World War veterans," which goes to show you how well those sacrifices paid off. We do occasionally see something of a military presence, but they're far more successful at executing people than they are at helping them. Dr. Oakes finds himself having to make the harshest kind of triage, as an exodus of the barely living and almost dead shamble their way to the front doors of his hospital. With supplies low and little in the way of working equipment, on account of the electromagnetic pulse from the nuclear airbursts having fried most electronics, the good doctor and his colleagues are faced with more patients than they can handle. One of them is a pregnant woman, played by Amy Madigan, who later in the film gives a little spiel about why she doesn't have hope.
Hope for what? What do you think's gonna happen out there? You think we're gonna sweep up the dead and fill in a couple of holes and build some supermarkets? You think all those people left alive out there are gonna say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't my fault. Let's kiss and make up"? We knew the score. We knew all about bombs. We knew all about fallout. We knew this could happen for 40 years. Nobody was interested.
I can't argue with you.
Argue with me. Please. Give me a reason. Tell me about hope.
And I was like, that's me. That's me. Because, believe it or not, I'm not a pessimist. Deep down, I am a hopeless optimist. Emphasis on the hopeless. I want to be so wrong about what I see on the horizon. I want to be so wrong that a year from now, you can all laugh at me for how wrong I was. God, that would be so fucking awesome to be laughed at for being wrong about this country, to say nothing of the entire world. But I fear I will be laughed at for the wrong reasons by the wrong people. I'll likely be laughed at by ICE agents as they fire their AR-15s at my feet while making me dance. Give us one of them there Mexican hat dances, boy. Yeah! That's what I'm talking about. That's right, you dumb beaner. This is what you get for taking our jobs, you lazy beaner. And coward that I am, I'll be dancing along like, "Si, senor, blessed be King Dictator for the life throne." Because that's how bad things might get. It might be legally required for people of my ethnic handicap to speak in a thick accent, regardless of how well we talk English good. Anyway, at the University of Kansas, Professor Huxley, played by John Lithgow, and some of his students are sheltered in the science building, communicating via ham radio to those who are listening to stay indoors until the radiation levels have dropped to a safe enough level. It was through his character that I first heard Albert Einstein's quote about how World War IV would be fought with sticks and stones. The film did its job in properly putting the fear of the worst-case scenario of the Cold War straight into my 7-year-old soul. I wasn't sick with nightmares about it, but it definitely infected me with something. The days, months, years that followed were most interesting, to say the least. My nuclear anxieties were always in the morning for some reason. I'd walk down the street to the school bus stop, and I'd look up at the sky, hearing the sounds of jet engines, and I'd wonder if those were fighter jets off to war. I'd look at the vapor trails and wonder, did the missiles already launch? Oh, silly, naive me. Of course those weren't vapor trails. They were clearly chemtrails. It wasn't until a couple years later, 1989, the year of Batman, that the anxiety began to wane with the fall of the Berlin Wall. It finally went away in July 1991, at approximately whenever it was in Terminator 2 that John Connor asks why the Russians would nuke us if they were our friends now. The version I watched on video back then was a director's cut that ran about 5 minutes longer than the one that aired on television. This cut also played in theaters in Europe. There are currently multiple uploads of this cut on YouTube, but for this revisit, I wanted to go with the television cut, because I wanted to see the very same movie that 100 million people saw during its premiere on the ABC network on November 20th, 1983. I found a Blu-ray that features both cuts of the film, but of course it's out of print, which means I'd have to pay anywhere between $70 to $140 for a copy. Thankfully, I managed to find one upload of the TV cut on YouTube, which means it's probably gone by now. The video quality of this upload wasn't the best, but it was sourced from a VHS recording of the November 20th showing on an ABC affiliate in Philadelphia, which meant I got to see it exactly as one would have seen it that night, complete with commercial breaks, making for some brief hits of nostalgia to take off the apocalyptic edge. But I'm sure for those who watched that night, the viewing experience was nothing but edge. I'm sure people were too busy freaking out about the possibility of World War III to enjoy the advertisements for Commodore 64, the Minolta Talker camera, English leather cologne, Dexatrim, and the Dodge Vista. I mean, why bother dancing to K-Tel's Dancing Madness featuring songs by The Kinks, Naked Eyes, Human League, and Eddie Grant, or jamming along to K-Tel's Hot Tracks featuring songs by Michael Sembello, Eurythmics, Styx, Bryan Adams, Def Leppard, and Rick Springfield when you're too frozen in fear of fallout? Okay, sure, John Carpenter's Christine comes out this Friday, but will there even be a Friday? We might as well go to the movies tonight to watch Sean Connery return as James Bond and Never Say Never Again, because we'll likely never see another movie again. And I suppose afterwards we can't do worse than go to Denny's for their New York steak dinner with onion rings and a baked potato for only $5.49. But to be honest with you, I think I've just lost my appetite watching Steve Guttenberg lose his hair due to radiation poisoning. Oh yeah, the Goot is in this, credited as Steven Guttenberg, because this is a serious movie. His character is a college student named Steven, and he ends up sheltering with a bunch of hicks in their basement out in the middle of God's country. It's a good thing these cracker assholes only asked Steven for his first name. If they found out his last name was Klein, they'd probably blame him and his people for somehow being the reason that the world ended, and they'd end up making Jew stew out of him. Anyway, the idea is for Klein and the crackers to stay down there for an extended period of time until the outside radiation has subsided to a safe level. But that doesn't stop the oldest daughter from being a typically irrational young woman, screaming about how it stinks down there, which, yeah, I get it, and running outside so she can roll around in the now useless farmland with animals strewn about the contaminated topsoil. Stephen follows her outside to bring her back downstairs, which is quite the sacrifice, because as he tells her at that moment, where they stand, deadly radiation is having itself a good old time zapping right through them. I was surprised by how much this film holds up, not just as a 2-hour PSA that nukes are bad, but as an ensemble drama. It does feel like a miniseries cut down to feature length, but it doesn't come off feeling lopsided either. It remains a very well-structured film, and none of the characters are given short shrift. We're given just enough to get to know them, care about them, and pity the fuck out of them once the radiation sits in. Something interesting about the broadcast version that I watched is that there are ad breaks throughout the first half of the film, but once the bombs drop, the film plays out uninterrupted. There are still fades to black here and there, moments that were clearly meant for commercials to come in, but I can only guess no one wanted to be the asshole who follows up a scene of a woman violently hemorrhaging from her nether regions with ads for certs on the next episode of The Merv Griffin Show. Most of the film's music is taken from Virgil Thomson's score to the 1938 documentary The River, about how overcultivation caused the Mississippi River to wash away all of the precious topsoil needed for crops to grow. In the end, they solved that problem by building dams, and farmers were able to grow again. By the end of this movie, the topsoil is fucked, and to get food growing again, it's going to take time and resources of which the survivors have little to none. It doesn't look good. There are no happy endings, not even hopeful endings for our characters. It's game over for everyone, sooner or later. And I appreciate that the film doesn't cheat. It commits to getting its point across. The final disclaimer before the end credits even go as far as to say that what we just watched is actually a better case scenario of what would really happen, and that it would actually go down a whole lot worse in real life. The upload that I watched also included a special live episode of the ABC panel discussion program Viewpoint, which aired immediately after the film. Ted Koppel hosted a debate between guests Carl Sagan, Henry Kissinger, Elie Wiesel, Robert McNamara, George Shultz, Brent Scowcroft, and William F. Buckley Jr. Lady and gentlemen, watching these men of politics, science, and letters debate each other's point of view on nuclear weapons in such a reasonable and well-spoken manner was enough to make me break down into tears. Even the Republicans speak like rational human beings. What used to be, lady and gentlemen? What used to fucking be?
Carl Sagan.
Imagine a room awash in gasoline, and there are two implacable enemies in that room. One of them has 9,000 matches. The other has 7,000 matches. Each of them is concerned about who's ahead, who's stronger. Well, that's the kind of situation we are actually in. The amount of weapons that are available to the United States and the Soviet Union are so bloated, so grossly in excess of what's needed to dissuade the other, that if it weren't so tragic, it would be laughable. What is necessary is to reduce the matches and to clean up the gasoline.
I have great respect for Carl Sagan's judgment, but it is true that Andrei Sakharov himself suggested that the United States probably had to deploy the MX missile in order to bring the Soviets to the bargaining table.
All right, folks, before we even start with a smattering of applause, we had a little compact before. We're going to keep it. No signs of approval or disapproval. Let's go on to the next question. The lady in the back.
I don't think Dr. Sagan should be allowed to shake his head.
Well, let Dr. Sagan shake his head, and you can shake yours, and let's get on to the next question, please.
And so it was time to watch how they did made-for-television nuclear Armageddon on the other side of the pond with the 1984 film Threads, written by Barry Hines and directed by Mick Jackson. I knew of this film back in the day. I found it at one of the many video stores my family and I frequented. This particular shop was located inside a Latino supermarket. I would have rented it, but Police Academy 5, Assignment Miami Beach had just come out, and I was only allowed to rent one movie at a time. It was the right move in retrospect. I enjoyed the further adventures of Jones, Hightower, Tackleberry, Callahan, and Hooks while chowing down on some of the most delicious, freshly made churros that supermarket had to offer. But the video store closed down soon after, and Threads became out of sight, out of churro-addled mind. Threads' reputation is of a film that is far more grim and scary than The Day After. And they weren't kidding. The first thing we see in the movie is a close-up of a spider. Aye, spider! And a couple minutes later, a woman is telling her boyfriend that she's pregnant. Aye, pregnant girl! And so I buckled up for what was to follow. Instead of the American heartland, this film takes place in the city of Sheffield, located in South Yorkshire, England. And I'm pretty sure I mispronounced all of that. It looks like all of the locations of The Day After, city, suburb, and country, all pressed together. And the first half of the film kind of feels like a Mike Leigh-style kitchen sink drama. We're introduced to a young couple, Ruth and Jimmy, who are too busy figuring out the next steps as expectant parents to pay much attention to the hostilities between the Yanks and the Russians. At one point, Jimmy changes the radio station just as it was reporting breaking news so he can get the latest sports scores. I don't think Jimmy's trying to avoid the news, he just doesn't know any better. He probably figures it's the same old stuff. Someone's always fighting someone, but that's someone else's problem. It's not like it's going to affect him, right? I can't judge the guy or anyone else like him, because it's not like I'm not effectively doing the same thing by keeping my news and social media intake to an absolute minimum. I guess the difference between me and Jimmy is that I know things are getting worse. I guess it's just better for my mental well-being to not see the bullet coming. Meanwhile, Ruth and Jimmy's families are following the news, and after finding out about a nuke going off in Iran, they begin to prepare for the worst. This brings to mind another difference between this film and The Day After. In the American film, many citizens continue to go about their regular day right up until the bombs go off. You see some people at the movie theater, attending school, going to a football game, even having a wedding ceremony. To be fair, that last example might be more about how irrational a bridezilla can be. But in Threads, we see the gradual breakdown of the norm over the course of a couple of days. The radio and television begin to broadcast instructions on how to plan and prepare for disaster. They're told how to set up bomb shelters in basements, or if they don't have that, to use mattresses the way kids would use them to make forts. It's bad enough to hear instructions on what to do with dead bodies and how to dispose of them. It's worse when these instructions are preceded by really eerie tones and odd melodies. They're real nightmare fuel, those death jingles.
When you hear the attack warning, you and your family must take cover at once. Do not stay out of doors. If you are caught in the open, lie down. If you leave your home, your local authority may take it over for homeless families. And if you move, the authorities in the new place will not help you with food, accommodation, or other essentials. You are better off in your own home. Stay there.
People also begin to panic buy food and supplies. And of course, the prices have been marked up to nearly twice the cost. I gotta hand it to the Brits, though. Their version of panic buying appears far more reserved and respectful compared to the Yanks in The Day After, where they're racing each other down the aisles to be the first to pull cans off the shelves as if they were on supermarket sweep. No one is fighting each other over stuff in the UK. Nope. They save their violence for football. Boy, is this a gloomy movie. Even the style of the film is dark, and it's shot on grainy handheld 16mm, looking very much like a documentary catching events on the fly as they happen, with most of the shot compositions taken from cramped, uncomfortable angles. Nicholas Meyer's intention with The Day After was to make everything look as plain and uncinematic as possible. But compared to what Jackson pulls off, Meyer's film might as well be an epic Hollywood spectacle. There are inner titles that add details to what is being shown. We learn about the area, the population, and their proximity to military and industrial targets. Later, those stats take on a disturbingly detached and clinical tone when they begin to inform us on things like the cataclysmic effects on the environment, on the crops, the loss of food and water, how many people have died, how they died, and how the survivors will eventually die. There's also a narrator who pops in every once in a while, and by a certain point, I felt that I was watching a documentary from the future, produced by a higher form of life from another part of the galaxy, about how once upon a time there were these stupid savages called Earthlings, who eventually destroyed themselves. Speaking of which, when we get to the point of the film where the doomsday clock hits midnight, it shows that the filmmakers clearly had a smaller budget than those on The Day After, but it's certainly no less effective. It's just as horrifying. Like The Day After, there's scary imagery mixed with stock footage. But to be real with you, those public domain shots of atomic bomb tests from the 1950s make for a brief relief from the shots of kids crying and middle-aged women pissing themselves. Something that this film has that The Day After doesn't is the sound of people screaming in the background while all of this is going on. It sounds like a preview of hell. That's really the only way I can describe how those screams affected me. There are also plenty of close-ups of charred human beings, twitching cats, and dead dogs. But I think the worst of it is the poor son of a bitch who was in the middle of taking a shit when it all went down. It horrified me to think of being in such a compromised position, unable to wipe my ass before kissing it goodbye. The aftermath is more gruesome than its American counterpart. You're immediately hit by the pain and anguish, rather than gradually introduced to it. We're talking about mums with half a burnt face crying out to their dead children while slowly succumbing to the effects of radiation exposure. We're talking the local government's attempts to bring some kind of order to what's left of their city and failing miserably at it. And just like The Day After, among the survivors is an absolutely useless young woman who can't get by without her man. Just like real life. As per emergency orders, the surviving members of the local city council are given full power of the internal government. Leading them is Chief Executive Sutton, who has to make the hard choice of denying care to people in high radiation areas, because to do so would be to send able-bodied people to die in a futile attempt to help the dying. We watch as Sutton and his people smoke cigarettes while they work, because they might as well. They're all as good as dead anyway. If it's not radiation, it's the lack of air in their underground shelter that's going to kill them. So might as well smoke them while they got them, I guess. We see that all the preparation by the government and the citizens of Sheffield for such a life-changing event was all in vain. There are simply not enough resources to make a worthwhile difference, only enough to extend the misery. Even with food and water, good luck finding a proper place to relieve yourself because there's no sanitation, and there's no use disposing of corpses, so they're left to rot out in the open. It's a paradise for cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. There is still something of a police and military presence, but they're only good for shooting looters and then looting the looters' bodies. Or they're assigning people to live in homes, whether the homeowners want them there or not. Can you imagine that? You work hard all your life, finally get a place of your own where you can dance naked in your living room, listening to music while sticking things up your ass, and knock, knock, knock. Here come the pigs to tell you that you have to house some fucking family, these strangers. You have to share your rooms with them, your toilet, the things you stick up your ass, with these total strangers who smell like shit. Sure, you smell like shit too, but it's your smell, it's your shit. You can deal with it. Not these stinky stranger fucks. Get the fuck out of my house. It had me feel rather justified in that all the disaster preparation I've done in my life so far is to buy guns and ammo and Cliff Bars and water. I just need to get a hockey mask now, and I figure that'll be just about enough to get me by while I go around the wasteland gathering followers, using my guns and ammo to terrorize and pillage those who were thoughtful enough to prepare properly. But based on what I see happen to the people in this movie, I probably wouldn't live long enough to indulge in my fantasy of becoming the Lord Humongous, and it's for the best, really. I wouldn't want to be among these lucky people who survived the blast just to spend the rest of their days in an absolutely miserable existence, surrounded by death, destruction, no medical care, very little in the way of food and water, and the growing realization that if there is a God, either he doesn't give a shit or he has a hard-on for you. It would be like living in Gaza nowadays. The Day After has a very bleak ending. Threads somehow ends even bleaker, flashing forward another 10 years to show us that the next generation of survivors have regressed to dum-dums who communicate in monosyllabic grunts. It's almost as bad as the way kids today communicate with each other. But at least the kids in Threads go outside to play, loot, and rape each other. They're not doing it while being on their phones all day. When it comes to nuclear war, there is no such thing as preparation, only prevention. That's the message both of these films share, getting said message across as clear as Crystal Pepsi. When it comes to scaring the shit out of you while delivering that message, Threads is superior to The Day After. I still think The Day After is a very good film, though, and should absolutely not be dismissed. If anything, I'd compare the American film to a strong drink, served straight up with a water or soda back, while Threads is the same drink, only served neat with no chaser. But don't be mistaken, they're both very strong drink. Man, I miss alcohol.
We've no choice as far as I can see.
Can't we get any food from outside?
Where from? We've told Candy and everybody's in the same boat, haven't they?
What about the broiler?
Trouble is, we can't contact Rockley or Airsbrook. God knows what's happened there.
Probably been raided.
What do you think, Doctor?
We'll have to cut their rations. I've worked it out there. 1,000 calories for manual workers and 500 for the rest.
500? 500? That wouldn't keep a flea alive.
Should we be bothering to keep anybody alive if they can't work?
A lot of people are going to die anyway. It's back to survival of the fittest, I suppose.
What is that in terms of food, then? 500 calories?
I don't know. A few slices of bread, some soup, a lamb chop, a treacle tart, a few pints of beer. Bastards!
After Threads, Barry Hines continued to write stories about the working class, while Mick Jackson went on to have quite the eclectic career as a director of film and television. One wouldn't expect the director of Threads to also call the shots on the Steve Martin film L.A. Story and the Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston vehicle The Bodyguard, and yet he did. He was also behind the adaptation of the best-selling memoir Tuesdays with Morrie, which aired on the same network as The Day After, and the HBO movie Temple Grandin, for which he and star Claire Danes won Emmy Awards. I think it's safe to say that Mick Jackson has now fully atoned for bumming everyone the fuck out with this feel-bad movie. Had I managed to see Threads during my single-digit youth, I think it would have had about the same effect on me as The Day After, no better or worse. While I missed seeing Threads back then, I did get well acquainted with other post-apocalyptic features, mostly Mad Max ripoffs, but also some funky fare like A Boy and His Dog and Radioactive Dreams. If it featured a mushroom cloud or the radioactive symbol on the box cover, I was in. But I think it was the 1988 film Miracle Mile that messed me up the most, more than The Day After or Threads, because it took place during the final hour before it all goes down. There was an increasing anxiety throughout the film that at any moment mass chaos would break out, followed by fiery death. If any of the nuclear apocalypse movies ever came close to giving me nightmares, it was that one. Because I think it's the build-up to the end, rather than the end itself, that freaks me out. Like I said earlier, I'd rather not see the bullet coming. Maybe that's why I've been feeling the way I've been feeling the past year. Early in The Day After, Mr. and Mrs. Oakes are watching the news, and they recall their younger days during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But they look back at that shaky time with a wistfulness, as if to say, those were the days, you know? And I hate to say this, but nowadays, when I think of 9/11, I get filled with a similar sense of longing. The thought of 9/11 always made me sad, but now it makes me sad for a completely different reason. Dare I say it? I fucking miss 9/11. I miss what felt like the whole goddamn world coming together after that tragedy. I miss that feeling that we had all been taught some kind of painful lesson and that we'd learn something from it and that we'd become better people as a result and we'd take a step closer to becoming an even better version of ourselves. Of course, that didn't happen. Knowing what I know now, if some magical being gave me the choice of reliving the year 2001 over and over again until I died, or continue living in the present, where each new day gets increasingly absurd? Shit, I'm picking door number 1, homie. See ya, everybody. I'm off to simpler times. What can I say? 2001 was a pretty good year, except for that 1 month. I know this for sure. I certainly never entertained any thoughts of punching my own ticket back then. Not intentionally, anyway. See, I once gave autoerotic asphyxiation a try. It was really stupid in retrospect, because not only was the juice not worth the squeeze, I almost died doing that shit, and the idea of death actually sounded terrible back then. It might seem like a selfish thing for me to go back in time to live the 4x3 television lifestyle while leaving the rest of you behind to go enjoy fascism and late-stage capitalism, but I'd actually try to do some good for you people.
You people?
You people.
You people!
You said you people.
What do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people? Who the hell is us people?
First, I'd write a letter to Illinois State Senator Barack Obama, and I tell him that should he ever find himself in the position to make a public joke at the expense of that asshole real estate developer from Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, for the love of God, don't. Then I'd write a second letter to the very same orange shitstain himself, and I'd spend 90% of the letter showering him with pure, uncut praise. Then I'd spend the final 10% of the letter informing him about a really cool solo method towards achieving the greatest orgasm possible. I like to hedge my bets.
And by the way, fuck you.
This has been the Exiled from Contentment podcast, recorded live in front of an empty room. Exiled from Contentment has been brought to you by anger, paranoia, resentment, depression, low self-esteem, and Rally cigarettes, now with less nicotine and less throat irritants. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, if your cigarette tastes different, smoke Rally. Episodes of this podcast can be downloaded at efcontentment.podbean.com. That's E as in egads. This asshole's podcast is terrible. F as in fuck this asshole's terrible podcast. Contentment as in something this asshole hasn't felt in a very long time. Pod as in podcast. As in everybody's got their own goddamn podcast nowadays. And bean as in what the Mexican-American host of this podcast probably eats every day. Am I right, real Americans? The Exiled from Contentment podcast can also be downloaded at exiledfromcontentment.blogspot.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as EF Contentment, all one word. Follow or friend us so we can then immediately have your tweets and posts muted in order for us to have a higher friend and follower count while pretending that we care about you. You can also email us at exiledfromcontentment@gmail.com. Until our next ramblings, this is Princess Sparkle for the Exiled from Contentment podcast saying take care and be well.